In today's video, I want to talk about the idea of upsizing baits and downsizing baits and where I actually do each one of those. You know, where do I upsize, where do I downsize, and how do I determine whether I'm going to tie on a bigger bait or a smaller bait. And this is like a really fun idea because this is an idea that I've talked about a bunch with my fishing buddies. It's something that I've taken notes on myself to just kind of help me to even learn and to pay attention, you know, like when did the smaller bait help, when did the bigger bait help, when did the extremes help, and you know, what caught the most fish. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So let's talk about downsizing first. When do I downsize? Well, for me, for the most part, when downsizing, I'm talking about water clarity and pressure. So when the water's clearer and there's a lot of pressure on the body of water, that's when I tend to downsize. And the reason that I tend to downsize is because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be a lot more finesse, just a lot more natural, a lot more kind of part of the fish's world instead of intrusive into the fish's world. I think that that's like the big key here is are we trying to be intrusive, or are we just trying to be as natural as possible and unintrusive? And I think when you're dealing with clearer water and way more pressured fish, and those two things don't have to work together. You could have really pressured fish but not clear water, or really clear water and not pressured fish. But those two factors are one of the factors that I choose to downsize. When you're dealing with those two factors, I think that we want to be as natural as possible, as unintrusive as possible, to just make it something that the fish looks like everything else that the fish has seen, something that it's used to eating, it's used to being around, something that isn't going to really, you know, disturb it at all or like mess up its natural functions. And I think oftentimes if we do that in those clearer water, more pressured situations, downsizing can be the key to actually getting more bites. And so one of my favorite tools to do that with is like this little dude right here. This is that little mini max chatterbait. And this thing is awesome because this is a 1/2 ounce chatterbait, but it's little bitty itty tiny. I mean, I have the little baby, the deal on the back of there from Berkeley. And I mean, you guys can see that thing in comparison to my hand. It's a tiny little bladed jig. And this thing just does a really good job of looking like little small bait fish. And what I found is in clearer water, this thing absolutely excels, where bigger bladed jigs don't excel as much. And it just does a really good job of having a really tight, small vibration that gets those fish to react to it, even in super clear water and super pressured situations. And so that's where I'm going to downsize. Now, where am I going to upsize? Where am I going to go to the extremes of things, like one of my favorite lures of all time, which is the Chapo 120. Well, for me, what I kind of think about when I think about upsizing is the exact opposite of downsizing. We want to be intrusive into the fish's world. We want to kick in the door and be like, hey, we're here, come look at this, I want you to eat it. And I have found that to be the most effective in the extremes. So like extreme warm, extreme cold, extreme amounts of bait fish or no bait fish at all. Like those extreme variables that we see in fishing is where I tend to throw bigger lures just to really get something in those fish's face. And I think the goal with it is, like I said, just be super intrusive with it. Get those fish to react, get those fish's attention, get them to either blow up on a topwater or to eat a big swim bait, big glide bait, or you know, something like that. And so that's where I'm going to throw things like the Chapo. Like the Chapo 120, it's one of my favorite bites that happen all year. And what happens is right at the end of the summer, going into early fall, there's a massive amount of bait fish that move up shallow, and they're all about that big. And so the thing is you think, well, Alex, why wouldn't you throw something that looks like all those bait fish? Because for me, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be loud, I'm trying to be intrusive, I'm trying to stand out among all those billions of bait fish. And this Chapo not only does a good job of like throwing water and looking like a bass chasing those little bait fish, but it's also a big, loud profile that does a really good job of, again, being intrusive, standing out in all the noise of everything that's going on, and you can get fish to eat it. And just like in the exact opposite of that, again, going to that other extreme, I've seen times when there's no bait fish up shallow, when I'm looking for that big rogue roaming fish in big areas, that you tie on things like the Chopo, the big walking baits, big glide baits, big worms and things like that. And it's just something so big, so intrusive that the fish can't help but swim over and try to kill it and eat it. And so that's where I upsize, that's where I downsize. This is a fun video for me just because I myself thinking about that have kind of almost taught myself something in this situation where, you know, kind of leaning on my experience of where did I do each has helped me to even kind of dial in more when I need to do it and when I don't need to do it. And if you want to see me throwing this bad boy right here and getting some of the best topwater blowups that you will ever see, click this video, it's popping up right here.